the 235th Block Talks, we chat with Jesse Shrader, CEO and co-founder of Amboss Technologies, to explore how to scale payments using Bitcoin. I'm your host, Mauricio Magaldi, and this is Block Drops, your weekly digest on blockchain for business. These news are not a form of endorsement, sponsorship, or encouragement for consumption, and are meant for educational purposes only. All right, everybody, I'm here with Jesse Shrader, who's going to tell us who he is and what he does with blockchain. Jesse, welcome to Block Talks.
Thanks so much for having me, Mauricio, and really excited to dive in. So I believe my first touch was just out of college. So I had studied environmental engineering, and I kept hearing about this thing called Bitcoin. And I heard that if you watch some ads, you could hit a faucet and they would give you free Bitcoin. So I remember going through that, watched a couple of hours of ads to get a couple of fractions of a Bitcoin, which I promptly went to the fastest gambling site and gambled it all away. So click a couple of buttons and watch this magic internet money disappear in front of your eyes. But I did save a little bit. I had, I think, 10 cents that was left over, and I created a Coinbase account and I moved it over there. And then, 3 years later, as I'm doing my first temp job out of college, and I was working in a call center handling class action lawsuits. I learned that banks were doing this funny thing where they were reorganizing debit card transactions to maximize the overdraft fees that they could charge. And, I was already upset at that time that the banks had caused the great financial crisis. I'm working a temp job with an engineering degree, and here banks are taking advantage of people with literally no money. And that's where I was looking for, what's the alternative to the banking system? And that, after looking for other banks, I realized that the answer was Bitcoin once again. So that's what brought me back. And I started to, I bought some Bitcoin, watched it triple in value and then crash back down. And as it's crashing, that's when you do your deep research, because you want to figure out, do I sell this or do I double down? And the more I researched, the more I wanted to double down.
Yeah, it's a magical, ideological or conceptual encounter, if you will, when it clicks to you. I've had very similar stories come by the show. So at that point, you're mad at finance. You were now rekindling your love to Bitcoin. What was life like? Meaning, did you get the matter on your own hands and I'm an engineer, I'm going to build something? Or was it more on the trading, speculative side? What was that like a blend of the two? What was, your next move after kind of finding Bitcoin back and, falling back into love with Bitcoin?
Sure. So as you're trying to due diligence this thing that is crashing in value and you're trying to figure out whether to sell it or not, I'm going through technical due diligence. So I'm thinking there's no way that there could be an internet-based money. There has to be some trick to it. It must be hackable. And so I'm learning about digital signature algorithms. I'm learning about cryptographic hash functions. I'm watching Andreas Antonopoulos videos and resonating with him as he's just obsessed with this technology, not eating, not sleeping. I just want to learn all I can about blockchain, about Bitcoin. And, my mind was just running wild. So I've got kind of an inventor mindset. So I'm thinking everything should be on the blockchain. We should put health records on the blockchain. We should, is Ethereum fixing this? What about privacy? Should I go with Monero? But going through all of that process, and then just really understanding the technology, And for me, one of Andreas's talks was Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin, and how because Bitcoin is open source technology, it continues to improve. And any ideas that come across have to be adopted on a widespread basis by the most resistant people to change, which are the Bitcoiners. They don't want to change Bitcoin's code, and only the best ideas get through. And I really like that because I've got this money that doesn't really change. It's the rest of the world that's going crazy. And I can always go back to Bitcoin. And so that's where I focused. But I also ran into some challenges with Bitcoin because Bitcoin is not a great payment method by itself. I got so excited about Bitcoin that I was wanting to use it and spend it on gifts for my friends and family for Christmas that was coming up. I ended up spending $60 in transaction fees, and the transactions took too long. It went over the timer. So it pushed me into my next phase, which was improving how Bitcoin payments work. And that's what pushed me onto the Lightning Network.
I've had over 200 people on the show. And one common thread of people who are building in crypto in general is that they got a problem that they went through consistently, and they got just fed up with that. And I'm like, I'm gonna solve this. And it resonates with me that you had a face first encounter with an issue, and I'm, you know what, I'm gonna fix this. That's awesome. So my audience isn't technical, so I'm gonna have to I'm gonna ask on their behalf, like, how does one program Bitcoin for payments? Is this still, because I'm well aware of the Taproot upgrades and what the new opcodes made possible, but the underlying protocol is still the same, right? The speed, the consensus, and everything works the same. So how do you build a payment solution on top of that, even if it's now possible to program?
Well, you sound more technical than I am. I'm dangerous when it comes to using some of these tools. So when I was trying to find a way to save on fees, I was looking for existing tools out there. And I tried one out called ThunderHub, and it was a way to start using the Lightning Network. And it was the first user interface that I didn't have to use command line in order to make payments. And in ThunderHub, that's where I got connected with the Amboss co-founder. And so we eventually teamed up because I loved the user interface that he had. But really, Lightning, you don't have to be able to code or program in order to be able to use this instant payment method. It really is just finding other people that are using it. So how do I discover other folks that are on this network and get connected to them? It really is kind of this invisible social network that functions as a payment system. So it's like, how do you find friends outside of Facebook?
Interesting. Lightning has probably one of the, if not is the most popular, and I'm gonna say it in quotes, layer 2 of Bitcoin. And I understand that there's nuance to this. Bitcoiners don't like to call anything layer 2, and they obviously have very their Bitcoins are very dear to them, to hand over to any other piece of infrastructure. I don't blame them. But how does one get started with something like this as a builder, right? So you said you're not as technical, and you're somewhat dangerous. So how do you go into the world of Bitcoin with all these limitations? Then you have Lightning as this, as you said, the social network that also works as a payments mechanism. So how does one build a business on something that is supposed to be fully decentralized? And if you're fully decentralized, then everyone is their own businesses. How does that work?
It all starts, like you mentioned previously, about identifying what the problem is, and then you start scratching your own itch. So the first problem that I had was Bitcoin fees were too high. I start using the Lightning Network. And then the next problem I have is, who do I connect to? And so what we ended up building was a social network for Lightning node operators. We built Amboss.space, and today it's a Lightning Network Explorer. So I look up a different name and then communicate how to connect to them. I also put their contact information, so you can actually have a conversation with the other person. You're not just randomly connecting. From there, what types of tools are you using? We ended up, okay, here's where it gets technical. The Lightning has liquidity challenges. So you have to, in order to receive payments, you need someone else to connect to you. So you have to be attractive. Well, one way to be attractive is to pay someone else to connect to you. So we built the first liquidity marketplace where you didn't need to install anything. Now this is the largest liquidity marketplace out there, and it's called Magma. And what it means is that you can get paid for opening Lightning channels to other people if you are well connected. And where that has evolved, well, the market really took over from that point, because this whole idea of yield on Bitcoin emerged out of that. And we built a product around that called Rails. And what it enables is people can hold Bitcoin. They don't have to give up self-custody. They can maintain self-custody, and they're starting to earn Bitcoin on their Bitcoin. So now, because we're experienced with this, we've been able to support people with operations, really just be managers of people's Lightning nodes without having the permission or like any of the functionality to be able to send or withdraw any of their Bitcoin. We can really provide a service, a management service based around this. And that's our next product called Rails.
In that particular like realm of adoption, what has this enabled you to do? We're in the world are either the users or your node operators. How geographically distributed it is, and what are the like maybe user stories you've seen emerge from just being able to move Bitcoin around without a lot of friction?
I'll tell you the story of going to the Bitcoin conference in Miami, and I believe it was 2021, where the Bitcoin law in El Salvador was announced. So we got Nayib Bukele kind of on video call announcing that now Bitcoin is legal tender in El Salvador. And, amidst all the excitement about having Bitcoin be legal tender was a quiet panic for people that were recognizing that in order to serve the people of El Salvador well, Bitcoin has to do payments well. Because you can't buy a cup of coffee with an on-chain Bitcoin transaction. You can't be spending that amount of fees. And we know that the people of El Salvador are not well capitalized. So this is a troubled country, and it was at that time. Has gone through an incredible transition since, but we want people to be able to participate at a very low cost. And in order to do that, you need the Lightning Network to function very well. And 2021 was the year that we launched Amboss Space. And so we saw communities pop up like PlebNet. It was also Plebs to El Salvador. All over the Lightning Network, folks were trying to set up a payment system that would work for the people of El Salvador. And we saw an explosion of usage in the Lightning Network. And having been to El Salvador, gone to El Zonte, that is still a place where you can freely pay with Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, pay for your goods, any of those, any meals you want to have, if you want to enjoy some shrimp on the beach. I bought a bathing suit because I forgot to pack one. And yeah, that's like El Zonte. You could also buy some delicious pupusas from Mama Rosa, one of the first vendors that accepted Bitcoin in El Zonte.
Yeah, usually crypto or permissionless money has a lot of space in emerging markets, given the sheer distress of their economic and financial systems, it's really interesting to see how permissionlessness plays a part in economic freedom and in even dignity in some of these places, just for the fact that it is permissionless. So very interesting use case. So again, building on Bitcoin, not the most trivial thing. Can you pinpoint your top three challenges going from being a very mad person about the financial system to being a builder? Being a builder comes with its own, sets of challenges. So what were the top three that you went through while you built this? And I want to understand how that kind of prepared you to continue going and then achieving the success you've had so far.
So the first one is just setting up a company and making the personal decision that you are the person that can do this because of your individual experiences. You can pursue this as a venture, and you can communicate the vision and attract investors to go the same direction that you're going and want to support you. So I think that was like the first challenge, and really it's a personal one. The second challenge that I've encountered is the Lightning Network is complex, and I think when I communicate about it, many people think that they can't understand it. It's too hard for them. They can't figure it out. And the reality is that most of this technology that is, kind of second nature to me at this point, after years of doing it, will be abstracted away. So you won't know that you're using the Lightning Network. You may use another layer 2, like Spark or Arc, or even an exchange. And many of them have integrated Lightning at this point. All you know is that you're getting paid instantly and that you don't have to wait 60 minutes for 6 confirmations on the Bitcoin blockchain. The third one is that payments are a network effect. And wherever you look, especially if you're creating a marketplace-based product, that there are chicken and egg problems everywhere you look. So you do have to play at both sides of the market. If you create a marketplace product, which we have to find both the supply and the demand side. And what we found is there is an unending supply of Bitcoin that's looking for self-custody yield. Within the first month of us announcing Rails, we had 3,700 Bitcoin on our waitlist. So 3,700, and these are primarily individuals. And what happened after that is the Bitcoin Treasury Company started contacting us, which is just an unending amount of Bitcoin. Not everybody wants to trade with their Bitcoin or do these delta neutral strategies because they carry additional risk of liquidations, etc. But what we've developed on the Lightning Network is, I think, one of the lowest risk possible ways that you could actually start to earn from your Bitcoin, and be able to provide a valuable service to other people. But there are two sides of that market. It's not just supply that won't answer everything. And we had to find who needs the payment infrastructure, who needs all of that liquidity. And we've recently found it in the iGaming space, which, as I've been diving into, has severe payments challenges. Many of the early Bitcoiners that you get to know either used the Silk Road or were poker players. And that is exactly the market. iGaming, it has like all of these online games that involve money. And if you want to do payments over the internet, the typical payment processors either don't want to serve you because of some ideological reason, or they're confronted with the fraud rates and the chargeback rates that are going on. So as we looked at the iGaming space, we saw that this is a $100 billion industry. and 15% of the revenue goes to paying for chargebacks. This is an industry with incredible fraud risk. And having an instant payment system with no chargebacks is a complete game changer for them. If I could help them recover 15% of their revenue, well, I've found that the demand for that supply that I've already attracted with yield on your Bitcoin.
And how has been the uptake on that industry? Because you're right. One of the challenges, because of sanctions, because of FATF, because of all the Western regulated world, sometimes you have entire economies depending on things that they can't access for whatever reason. How has this performed? And I mean, are there any highlight cases you might want to share on that success?
Yeah, I won't be naming customers today. However, we went to the ICE gaming conference in Barcelona, and in the 2-day conference came away with 140 leads. And many of these are doing over $1 million a month in payment processing volume. However, many of them can't get a bank account in their jurisdiction. So they are truly operating on the fringes and represent a portion of the underserved market. And that's a market that we're very interested to serve. We have the right technology to solve their problem. And I believe that, the whole reason that you get into Bitcoin, you get into crypto, is so that you can have permissionless access. You can have freedom with your money. You can be sovereign. And I don't have anything fundamentally opposed. Nothing in my morals prevents me from being able to serve these folks that need payment processing, that need a better form of money. And so, yeah, it's been a phenomenal focus for us because the conversion rate that we've seen is very high. And I would love to be able to serve more folks and give them some basic banking services with better technology.
Every time we talk about yield or we talk about return, I have a financial services background, so obviously I'm looking into what the mechanics are and how the actual values move around. That is the first use case, right? I mean, if you think about the technology being able to program multiple things, instant payments, having the liquidity marketplace and the rails, this is kind of an entry point use case. As you develop and you kind of settle on that particular use case, is there any exploration in terms of, and I know this is going to sound weird in Bitcoin terms, like collateralization and being able to lend and borrow and maybe swap for other types of assets. Is there a DeFi culture emerging from the fact that now you get to earn Bitcoin on Bitcoin?
I think that culture is emerging. And one of the early pieces was by Nick Bhatia, and he talked about the time value of Bitcoin. And that paper was the inspiration for us to build this liquidity marketplace, because he was right. He was right about it's possible to earn yield on your Bitcoin without giving up custody. So that means a different point on the risk and return spectrum than lending and borrowing. So when you talk about collateralization, it's a different form of risk, but it still is lending. Whereas what we're doing with liquidity here is leasing for a purpose. So you're creating payment infrastructure and not having to give up custody ever. So you still control the Bitcoin and you have unilateral exit capability. So completely different point on the risk and return spectrum. But it is a useful framing. And I think it's becoming, we're getting that exploration deeper and deeper in Bitcoin as it becomes more financialized.
Did the fact that ordinals came to be, was this like, did it help? Did it get in the way? How was the relationship between what you were building and, that phenomenon of, oh, now we get to see the unfungibility of Bitcoin to a certain extent? What was that like? And was that a hindrance or was that something that helped you kind of propel?
I love the idea of Bitcoin being anti-fragile. So, on the one hand, ordinals caused fees to spike on Bitcoin. So became very expensive to move Bitcoin into different structures. However, I was already operating on Lightning. So if you wanted to move Bitcoin during the time of the ordinals fee explosion, well, the only way to do it economically was to use the Lightning Network, which my response is, what a perfect time to raise my fees for routing a payment on Lightning. And I saw the market had a slow or kind of a delayed reaction to elevated fees on layer one Bitcoin. But it's a dynamic that I think will continue into the future. So now that Bitcoin experienced this kind of attack on Bitcoin, a lot of people frame it that way. Well, Bitcoin has grown and matured, and Lightning Network has grown and matured to be able to handle some of these cases where some of the transactions that were pending and unconfirmed and not paying a high enough fee were dropping out of the unconfirmed transactions. They were dropping out of the mempool, which caused issues for Lightning. But because of that, well, the focus since the ordinals explosion has been on maturing that portion of it. So now, if that happens again, and I kind of hope it does for the sake of the miners, that Lightning will be here, will be ready, will be more mature, be able to serve people that still need to move their Bitcoin, even if on-chain fees are too high.
The anti-fragile thing absolutely, aligns. But also, if both the Lightning Network and Bitcoin are now able to fend off those quote unquote attacks, it will be interesting to see that coming, right? And see how the reality reacts to this coming anew. And that will be not that I'm advocating on an attack. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it would be good to see that happening in the sense that now you can validate that the changes or upgrades or adjustments have been. And now that you have a much bigger community in Magma and Rails, how that absorbs the flow, the need, and what other needs emerge from that. Now, how long have you been building?
We've been building Amboss for about 5 years now.
5 years. The blockchain doesn't stop, right? The blockchain just keeps producing blocks. So, how do you handle your physical and mental health building in an industry that has no recognition for time off? How does that work for you? Do you have a recipe? Do you have a routine? How do you handle that contrast between being a human working in a 24/7, 365 industry? I'm assuming you're a human, by the way.
Yeah. Being a founder of a company is a crazy thing to do. That is not for people that are of sound mind. So I might kind of just throw out the premise that you've just given me. It's an insane thing to do. And you have to do it for, love of the technology, love of the people that you're working with to make this happen. And having continued pressure to, really, really be a workaholic. And I think that's where I'm at. I've got a, supportive group of folks. Sometimes Bitcoiners will turn against you, and you have to be able to have a social network outside of it that can really support you in those times. But overall, I think you have to do it out of a deep love for what you're doing, what it will mean for people in the future if they have instant chargeback free payments or yield on their Bitcoin. Any of those things really do help keep you motivated, keep you working to build a better future.
In terms of the industry, trying to zoom out a little bit now. I mean, I went too deep into the individual, but just trying to pull back a little bit. In terms of the industry, what do you think is the one thing we must fix now to avoid working another like, I don't know, 15, 20 years, and then realizing we didn't fix this one thing and we're back to square one. What would that one thing be, and why?
Yeah, I think the industry has focused far too much on creating a new blockchain for things. Um, I think we've learned that new blockchains don't really solve anything. I think there's been a couple of use cases that have been explored, but I really don't understand why blockchains get so much focus. So one of the what I think people should be focused on is increased tokenization use cases, and that Bitcoin is now capable of, through Taproot assets, being able to issue tokens on Bitcoin that are Lightning compatible. And the future that that enables is that you can have instant foreign currency exchange. um, you are able to start a payment as one currency, the token that I prefer, and I'm able to pay anybody else that is using the Lightning Network, and they can receive whatever token they want on the other side. But in the middle, the neutral territory is Bitcoin, and so it's just a Bitcoin transaction going through the Lightning Network. Um, and that's a way to not have to do all these cross-chain bridges, which are usually the targets for all the hacks. If you can really just do this natively on the most secure blockchain, which is Bitcoin, well, that answers 90% of the issues. So I would really like to see people focus more on being able to bring other currencies to Lightning and move away from blockchain as the future type narrative.
Do you have non Bitcoiners, non crypto people in your life? Do they call you every time there is a Bitcoin all time high trying to enter the industry at that point? How do you onboard new people to the industry if that's a thing you do?
Yeah, I'll speak to people frequently about it. When I was working my normie job, I was the crazy Bitcoin guy. I had a bright orange Bitcoin backpack. I had buy Bitcoin written on it, and I wore it to work every single day. Like, I was deranged. I mean, I told you that, starting a company is not for people of sound mind. But I remember being asked, like, at the depth of the bear market, like, what's the price of Bitcoin? Like, how much is it? And I was like, $5,000. I was embarrassed by it. Of course, I should have been shouting from the rooftops. Guys, buy this thing. Even our next bear market is, it at what, 60 some $1,000. Really, I have to educate people on some of the flaws of the current money system. But I have become less evangelical over time. I've realized that, try as I might to convince someone that they should investigate this technology, that they should, buy some Bitcoin just to have some. Um, I have to realize that people will come to it when they want to, whether it's from, getting paid some free Bitcoin online from watching ads and gambling it away, just being able to see those use cases. Um, all in all, people will come to it when they're ready for it.
I think it was Saylor that said that people will buy Bitcoin at the price that they deserve. And even though I don't agree with Saylor all the time, I think that's a pretty darn good, quote. And it's a way of just having people stop to think about the power of the technology first and foremost, right? What does that mean? It's not just an asset class. There's an entire body of work behind it that enables the asset class to be what it is, and most people don't actually realize it. We're about time, Jesse. This was very interesting. I haven't had a Bitcoiner in the show for a while, so knowing, coming to someone who is building on it and with it and for it is a very refreshing way to kind of rekindle that. Um, what would you like people to take from this conversation forward as they realize the power of building on the decentralized paradigm?
It is permissionless. I think there's a lot of privacy benefits that folks can get from this. Certainly on cost efficiency. I see the technology that we're building putting Bitcoin in a place to disrupt the foreign exchange market, which settles $9.7 trillion every single day. If you're talking about markets that aren't being served by the technology today, that is one of the biggest ones. And that is on our immediate horizon. It's something that we're very focused on at Amboss Technologies. So I couldn't be more excited for the future, where you have permissionless technology in a time where you have increasing capital controls all over the world. We're becoming less connected globally, where we have Bitcoin as a great connector between all the countries of the world.
I love that. Jesse, thank you, and hopefully we'll meet somewhere in the world, in this crypto conference world.
Thanks so much, Mauricio.
Thanks again. Catch us online. We're on Instagram at BlockDrops Podcast, on Twitter at BlockDropsPod or 0x Mauricio. We're on Lens at blockdrops.lens. We have a newsletter on LinkedIn. Write to us at blockdropspodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to the BlockDrops podcast at Spotify, iColab, Faberbun Tech, and all of the other major streaming platforms. Yay! Shout out to Jesse for turning his relentlessness into a business. Don't forget to leave the ratings on your favorite player and check out the merch store at blockdropspodcast.xyz. This is all for today. Stay rare, stay weird, LFG.